I'll never forget the way everyone laughed. It was the kind of laugh that doesn't just bounce off your skin, it digs into your bones. I was standing right there, paper plate in hand, barely touched my food, trying to stay small at the edge of the backyard, when my uncle, Darren, raised his glass and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's a failure. No one cares about her." There was a pause, a beat of silence, and then the laughter rolled in. Not just from the adults, but the kids, too. Little cousins who used to cling to my leg when they were toddlers were now laughing at me like I was some kind of joke. Even my Aunt Rochelle snorted into her wine cooler. I locked eyes with my mother. She quickly looked away, pretending to fix her napkin. I stood there frozen, all the air drained from my chest. I tried to laugh it off the way I always had at these family reunions. Smile, nod, swallow the burn, keep the peace. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the way Uncle Darren looked right at me, like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Maybe it was the way no one said anything in my defense. They never do. Darren has always been like this. Loud, controlling, the self-appointed king of the Rivers family. He runs a chain of car dealerships and makes sure everyone knows it. Every year at this reunion, he shows up flashing a new Rolex or bragging about a vacation in Turks and Caicos. And every year, I get cornered at some point with the same comments. "So Kaya, what do you do again? Still single? You ever think about going back to school?" They love to dress it up like concern. But today, he didn't even pretend to care. He just said it, out loud, in front of everyone. And the worst part? It wasn't a surprise. It was just the first time he'd said what they were all thinking. I could feel my face burning. I looked down at my plate. Half a hot dog and some cold potato salad. I should have said something. I wanted to. But what do you say when your whole family agrees you're worthless? I thought about walking out, just turning around and leaving quietly the way I came. No one would follow. No one would call. And then, out of nowhere, we heard a screech. Tires on the driveway, followed by several doors slamming and hurried footsteps crunching across the gravel. Everyone turned. A woman's voice rang out, urgent and loud. "Is Kaya Rivers here?" Head swiveled toward me. I blinked. My mouth opened, but no words came out. 3 people came into the backyard fast. 2 held cameras. 1 wore a microphone headset and carried a clipboard. "We're with Channel 6. We've been looking for her. The hero." The air shifted. I felt everyone around me freeze. Hero? The crew was heading straight toward me. My cousins parted like the Red Sea. Uncle Darren just stood there, blinking like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The lead reporter stepped right up to me and smiled. "Miss Rivers," she said, "we've been searching for you. We finally found you." I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure the camera could hear it. That's when she said the words that changed everything. Just a few hours earlier, I was standing in my tiny apartment, second-guessing whether I should even go. Every year I wrestle with the same question. Is it really worth it? I knew what would happen. The whispers, the fake smiles, the loaded questions that feel more like insults dressed as concern. But my mom had called me twice that morning, her voice hopeful, practically begging. "Please come, Kaya. You know how they are, but it would mean the world to me if you came. Just for a little while." So I said yes. Not for them, for her. I threw on my one decent sundress, pulled my hair into a loose bun, and headed over to the old family house where we held our reunions every summer. It's a big 2-story home with a wraparound porch and a backyard that feels like a miniature park. Picnic tables, a grill that's seen better days, and a long clothesline that no one uses anymore, but still hangs there like a memory. When I arrived, people were already deep into their drinks and gossip. Kids were running barefoot across the grass. Someone had connected a speaker to a Bluetooth playlist that kept switching from old-school R&B to top 40 hits. The smell of burgers and charcoal clung to the air. I tried to smile. I greeted my aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them acting like we hadn't seen each other in years, which honestly we hadn't. But the warmth was surface level. Once the hugs ended, so did the attention. They asked me the usual questions. "Still working at the diner?" You ever think about going back to college? Any special man in your life yet? And I gave them the usual answers. Still at the diner. Thinking about it. Nope, just me. What I didn't tell them was what I had done just 2 weeks ago. I didn't bring it up because deep down I didn't think they'd believe it. Or worse, they'd find a way to make fun of it like they always did. You see, 2 weeks ago I was walking home from my night shift at the diner. I'd just finished a brutal double and was dead on my feet. It was close to midnight when I passed the Maplewood apartment complex. I caught a weird smell. Smoke. Then I saw it. Flames through a third-floor window. No one else was around. Without thinking, I ran inside. The fire alarms weren't going off. I banged on doors, screamed for people to get out. When I got to the third floor, I heard kids crying behind one of the doors. I kicked it open. The smoke was thick and I couldn't see anything, but I kept moving toward the sound. I pulled out 3 kids, maybe 6, 8, and 10, and dragged their mother, who had passed out from smoke inhalation, down the stairs. I don't remember much after that except waking up outside on the grass while paramedics worked on her. When they asked my name, I just shook my head and walked away. I didn't want a spotlight. I didn't want cameras or stories. I just wanted to go home, shower, and sleep. But that decision, to walk away without telling anyone, meant that no one in my family knew what I had done. So at the reunion, I was still just Kaya the waitress, Kaya the underachiever, Kaya the failure. I sat at a table alone, picking at a plate of food, watching my cousins laugh and dance, watching Uncle Darren strut around like he owned the world. He's my dad's younger brother, but you'd think he was 10 years older with the way he carries himself. Ever since my father passed, Darren took it upon himself to look after us, which basically meant criticizing every choice I made. My mom, bless her, tries to soften his blows, but she's not strong like that. She avoids conflict. I've stopped expecting her to step in. I was halfway through my lemonade when Darren made that awful toast, when he called me a failure, and when the laughter rang out, I felt like every insecurity I'd ever carried was on display for the whole family to dissect. I didn't expect anyone to defend me, but the silence that followed cut deeper than any words. And that's when the screeching tires shattered the moment. That's when the news crew showed up. The reporter stood in front of me, smiling like she already knew everything. "You're Kaya Rivers, right?" she asked, with a calm, excited tone, like meeting me was the highlight of her day. I nodded slowly, still trying to wrap my head around what was happening. All around me, people were whispering, stunned into silence. Just seconds ago, I was the family joke. Now every eye was on me, but not in disgust, in disbelief. The camera crew behind her adjusted their lenses. One of them turned on a mounted light that lit up the whole backyard like it was a movie set. My heart thudded in my chest as I felt the heat of it on my face. 2 weeks ago, the reporter began, her voice shifting into the smooth cadence of someone used to being live on TV. A mystery woman ran into a burning apartment building on Maplewood Avenue. She pulled 3 children and 1 unconscious woman to safety. She vanished before anyone could get her name. But we found her. There it was. It felt surreal hearing someone else say it out loud. The truth I had kept buried these past 2 weeks. I hadn't told anyone. Not my mom, not my friends, and definitely not my family. Uncle Darren's mouth hung open. His drink was still in his hand, but he wasn't moving. A few of the kids stared at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Even Aunt Rochelle was speechless, and she always had something to say. The reporter turned back to me. "Why didn't you come forward?" she asked gently. "People have been calling you a hero. There's even a GoFundMe page set up in your name, but no one knew who to give the money to because you disappeared." I blinked. A GoFundMe. I had no idea. The moment I walked away from that fire, I had pushed the whole thing aside. I just needed to get back to work, to survive. I hadn't even checked the news. I couldn't afford to think about it. I looked around the backyard at every stunned face. My family, the ones who mocked me, ignored me, laughed at me, they were now quiet. The same people who saw me as invisible were hanging on every word. But my silence wasn't for them. It was for me. I didn't do it to be seen, I finally said. My voice shook, but I held steady. I did it because those kids were screaming. I didn't think, I just ran in. The reporter nodded, clearly moved. Well, now the whole city knows. And we're here to recognize you. Live on air for your incredible bravery. Behind her, a man handed her a small plaque engraved with my name and the words, Community Hero Award, City of Fair Haven. She held it out to me. I took it with both hands, still stunned. The weight of it wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't what they said I was. The cameraman motioned to the reporter and she wrapped up her segment. That's Kaya Rivers, she said, turning toward the lens. A true hero. Quiet, selfless, and finally recognized. Back to you in the studio. As soon as the camera light turned off, the crew began to pack up. The mood shifted again, but this time, it wasn't icy or judgmental. It was awkward. Like everyone suddenly realized they'd been wrong. A cousin of mine, Brandon, stepped forward hesitantly. Wait, that was you? You ran into a burning building? I nodded once. He looked genuinely stunned. Wow, that's insane. That's badass. Another cousin, Mariah, whispered to her sister, she saved kids, actual kids. And then I saw Uncle Darren. He hadn't moved. His face was hard to read, a mix of confusion, disbelief, and something else. Maybe shame. He looked like he wanted to say something, but for the first time in my life, he had no words. I had spent so many years letting this family define me. Their opinions had shaped the way I saw myself. As small, as invisible, as not enough. But standing there, holding that plaque, with a camera crew just feet away and strangers calling me a hero, I finally saw myself differently. I wasn't who they said I was. Not anymore. Maybe I never had been. But now, they all knew it too. The moment the news crew left, it was like someone had turned the volume back up on the world. Chatter buzzed through the backyard like static. Confused voices, stammering questions, and awkward attempts at conversation that hadn't existed minutes earlier. The same people who once barely acknowledged me were now circling like moths to a flame. But I wasn't interested in the sudden attention. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was just done. I slipped away from the crowd and went inside, needing space to breathe. My mom followed a few seconds later, clutching a paper napkin in her hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She closed the door behind her and just looked at me. Her eyes were glossy. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. I sat down at the kitchen table, my fingers still wrapped around the edge of the plaque, like it might disappear if I let go. I didn't want it to be about me, I said. And honestly, I didn't think anyone would care. My mom walked over, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat down. She reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "Kaya, I care. I always have. I'm sorry if I haven't shown it enough. Darren has such a loud presence. He takes the air out of the room." I nodded, not needing her to explain. I knew who Darren was. I'd lived under the weight of his shadow for years. He always knew how to say the exact thing that would cut me down, and I let it happen. Over and over again, but not anymore. Something inside me had shifted. I didn't need Darren's respect. I didn't need anyone's, because I finally respected myself. That moment in the burning building when I couldn't see and could barely breathe, I didn't freeze. I didn't run. I kept going. Because someone had to. Because I knew I could. And now, they knew it too. I stood up, gently placed the plaque on the table, and said, "I'm going back out there, but not to explain myself. I'm going because I need them to see me for who I really am, whether they like it or not." My mom nodded. "I'll be right behind you." I stepped outside and walked through the backyard slowly, my head high, no longer shrinking, no longer apologizing for who I was. The conversations quieted again as people noticed me. A few smiled nervously. Some nodded, but no one made jokes. No one rolled their eyes. Uncle Darren was leaning against the grill with his arms crossed. He watched me walk toward him like he wasn't sure if I was going to confront him or ignore him. Honestly, I hadn't decided yet. But as I got closer, he spoke first. "So, that was you, huh?" he said, his tone unsure, almost humbled. You saved those kids." I looked him in the eye. Yeah, that was me. He cleared his throat and glanced down at his shoes, then back at me. "Guess I was wrong about you." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because he wasn't just wrong about me. He had never really known me, and suddenly, that realization didn't make me sad. It made me feel free. I turned away and headed toward the swing set where a few of the younger kids were gathered. One of them, Jamie, my cousin's daughter, looked up at me with wide eyes. "Were you scared?" she asked. I smiled, terrified, but I did it anyway. She grinned like I had just told her the best bedtime story in the world. And that's when I understood the most important part. It wasn't about proving anything to my family. It wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about living in a way that mattered. And now that I had, nothing they said could ever undo that. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, my mom and I sat on the porch swing watching everyone slowly drift back into their small talk and lawn games. But things were different now. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the failure or the odd one out. I was Kaya, the one they overlooked, the one they underestimated, the one who ran into the fire. And from now on, I was going to live like someone who knew exactly what she was worth. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream I wasn't entirely part of. People came up to me, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, aunts who used to politely smile and walk away, even some of Uncle Darren's friends, offering awkward congratulations or trying to make small talk like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just watched me get humiliated a few hours earlier. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I wasn't chasing their praise. I had already proven who I was in the moment that mattered most. Not with a speech, not with a job title or a shiny car in the driveway, but in the middle of thick smoke, heat, and fear. Still, there was one thing left that hadn't settled. It was Uncle Darren. He hovered on the edge of every conversation I had, standing stiff and quiet, arms crossed like always. But now his usual smugness was gone. He wasn't sneering, he wasn't loud. He looked uncertain, like he didn't know how to act around me anymore. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to let him squirm. But another part, a deeper part, knew that if I didn't say something, the weight of his words would still live in me. I didn't need revenge, I needed release. So just before dusk, I walked up to him. He was standing alone at the drink table, staring into his red plastic cup like it might give him the right words. He looked up as I approached. "Kaya." I didn't say anything. I waited. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I didn't mean what I said earlier. I was just messing around, you know?" I raised an eyebrow. "Messing around?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It was a joke. No one knew about the fire. And if no one had ever found out," I asked, "would I still be the punchline at every reunion?" He didn't answer right away. For once, Uncle Darren didn't have a comeback. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "You've made a habit of making people feel small. You don't even realize the damage you do because you've always been the loudest in the room. But let me be clear. I'm not here for your approval. I never needed it." He looked me in the eye. Something in his face cracked. Not completely, but just enough. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "I guess. I owe you an apology." I didn't smile. I didn't offer him comfort. I just nodded. "That's not for me to decide," I replied. "But maybe next time, think twice before you speak on someone else's worth." I turned and walked away. That moment didn't make him a better man, but it made me a stronger woman. Later that night, as people started saying their goodbyes and the backyard lights dimmed, my mom pulled me aside with a soft smile. "You know," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear like she used to when I was little, "your father would be proud of you." Her voice cracked when she said it. My chest tightened. "I hope so," I whispered. "I really hope so." She pulled me into a long, tight hug, the kind that says everything words never could. And then, just as we were about to leave, a voice called out from across the yard. It was Mariah, one of my cousins. She held up her phone. "Kaya, you're trending. You're literally on the front page of Channel 6's site. Everyone's sharing your story." I laughed. Not the hollow kind I'd forced at so many reunions, but a real laugh. The kind that vibrated through my chest and made my eyes sting. People weren't laughing at me anymore. They were listening. Not because I was trying to be impressive or loud or perfect, but because I showed up when it counted, when it mattered. I didn't run from the fire. I walked into it. And now, I wasn't afraid of being seen. The next morning, I woke up to a phone vibrating endlessly on my nightstand. At first, I thought it was a spam call, but when I finally opened my eyes and checked my notifications, my phone was exploding. Hundreds of messages, friend requests, missed calls, DMs from people I hadn't heard from in years. My name was everywhere. Local waitress saves family in apartment fire. Heroic act caught on security cam. Identity finally revealed. Kaya Rivers, the woman who walked into the flames. It was surreal. My photo, the one they took right before the live news segment, had already been shared thousands of times. People were calling me brave, selfless, inspiring. Strangers were tagging me in posts, thanking me for what I'd done. Some even said I gave them hope. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not for who I was supposed to be, not for how I measured up to everyone else, but for who I actually was, for what I had actually done. That day at the family reunion had started as just another reminder of where I stood, always the outsider, always underestimated. But by the time it ended, I had changed everything without saying a single prepared word. All I had done was act. I did the right thing when no one was watching, and in the end, the world saw me anyway. Later that week, I returned to the diner. Same apron, same shift, but everything felt different. When I walked through the door, my manager clapped and someone shouted, "That's our hero!" Customers stood and applauded. A few even hugged me. One woman had tears in her eyes and said, "You saved those babies like they were your own. You're not just a hero. You're what the world needs more of." I smiled and thanked them, but deep down, I still didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like a person who did what anyone should have done. And yet, that was the lesson. Most people wouldn't have done it. Most people freeze. Most people look away. Most people wait for someone else to step in. I didn't. And that changed how I saw myself. Not just at work, not just at the reunion, but everywhere. Calls started coming in. A local podcast wanted to interview me. A youth center asked if I'd speak to their girls group. Even the fire department sent a letter inviting me to an awards ceremony next month. People were reaching out not because they saw me as a failure or a nobody, but because they saw me as valuable. I still lived in the same apartment, still folded napkins before every shift, still had bills to worry about, but something was different. I was different. I carried myself taller now. When I spoke, I didn't second-guess every word. When I walked into a room, I no longer tried to shrink into the background. Because I'd walked through something bigger than judgment, bigger than ridicule. I had walked through fire. A few weeks later, my mom and I met for lunch. She brought a small photo album she'd been working on. Inside were clippings of every article, printouts of every photo, every online comment she could find about me. She slid it across the table, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "You were always more than they saw," she said. "It just took a fire to show the world." I didn't cry. I just nodded, placing my hand on top of hers. That reunion taught me more than any award ever could. It taught me that sometimes the people closest to you will overlook your light because they've grown used to seeing you in the shadows. And sometimes the loudest voices in the room are the most insecure. They use volume to cover their own fear. But the truth, you don't need to shout to matter. You don't need a title to be worth something. You just have to show up in the moment that counts. So if you've ever felt like the failure in the family, if you've ever been laughed at, dismissed, or called a nobody, let me tell you this. You are more than they know. And one day they'll see it too. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if no one's ever told you this before, I see you, and you're not a failure.